And so this is a company that doesn't give a damn about the American people. All it cares about is creating profit for shareholders.
In the midst of economic uncertainty and global disruption, one company has consistently found itself at the center of fiscal power: BlackRock. Investigative journalist Whitney Webb has sounded the alarm on their growing influence, particularly how BlackRock has leveraged government policies to benefit itself, and how Bitcoin is going to help them effectively seize everyone's wealth. When the U.S. government set up funding facilities to supposedly bail out Main Street during the COVID-19 lockdowns, BlackRock took charge. But instead of using those funds to aid regular Americans, they redirected it into buying shares in their own ETFs. What happened to the public's interests? Nothing. Not a single change. This has become a hallmark of BlackRock's approach, not to uplift communities, but to create profit for their shareholders.
But again, this is a company that's so powerful, and its connections to the US government and US government fiscal policy are so intertwined that you're going to see BlackRock involved in the next crisis to come, regardless of whether Kamala wins or Trump wins.
Whitney Webb warns that BlackRock's deeply intertwined relationship with the U.S. government means they will be involved in future crises, regardless of who wins the next election, whether Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. A recent report from River Financial highlights that corporate adoption of Bitcoin is on the rise, with corporations now holding over 68,000 BTC, a 587% increase from 2020. And this is helping terrorists,
The Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the Department of State, and the CIA. Bitcoiners should pay close attention to these developments, as the DOJ in particular has attempted to paint Bitcoin as the payment of choice for well-known terror groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, signaling that this working group proposed by this bill will likely seek to specifically target Bitcoin. Adding to this concern is the fact that a slew of recent mainstream media reports, which cite Treasury and FinCEN officials, DOJ officials, and CIA analysts, have claimed that, quote, terrorists are turning to Bitcoin and they're learning fast. That Bitcoin is the, quote, new frontier in terror financing. And that, quote, Bitcoin is helping terrorists secretly fund their deadly attacks.
But while this might seem like progress, Webb cautions that the growing dominance of corporate giants like BlackRock presents an unprecedented threat. This corporate control over emerging assets like Bitcoin could result in massive wealth transfers from ordinary Americans to the billionaire class. In her interview with podcaster Sabi Sabs, Webb exposed how politicians from both sides, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump alike, have contributed to policies favoring the ultra-wealthy, all while ignoring the needs of the common people.
But, either way, I think, regardless of who wins, ultimately a lot of the same people are going to get what they want, because at the end of the day, so much of the stuff that the American people are tired of are really bipartisan agendas, right? And, regardless of who's in office, when there's a crisis, the same people tend to be called upon to solve the crisis. So, a good example of that would be the 2008 economic crisis. BlackRock was basically sent in to help handle the banker bailouts. And then during COVID, when Trump was in office, BlackRock was brought in to essentially design the COVID fiscal policy, which the ramifications of which we're still dealing with. That's just one example. But
BlackRock's bigger agenda. BlackRock's involvement doesn't stop at mere investments. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, once managed Donald Trump's personal fortune. BlackRock was also tapped to help shape the U.S. government's fiscal response to COVID-19. But instead of a true response to the pandemic, this was a bailout for Wall Street, much like their role in the 2008 financial crisis. And who benefited? Not Main Street, but the corporate giants once again. Now, Whitney thinks Bitcoin may not be a good idea, especially under Trump.
so, if you're of the opinion that you want Bitcoin to be, hyper Bitcoinization to come at all costs, even if that means it not being a tool for financial freedom anymore, or it being used by intelligence agencies to surveil people, or by Wall Street to, do their thing, then maybe it's fine. But if you're of the idea that, I want Bitcoin to be empowered to end irresponsible fiscal policy at the national level and want it to ensure financial freedom for everybody, then I don't think Trump's policies necessarily spell that out, unfortunately.
Webb points to BlackRock's going direct policy, which they devised in late 2019, just before the repo market began to crash.
I would urge people to go back to what Trump did when he was in office during the COVID crisis and the fiscal policy that his Treasury Department presided over, which was very bad and very criminal. And for people that aren't familiar, I would encourage them to look up the work of John Titus about the going direct reset, where essentially before there was a financial crisis related to COVID in late 2019, BlackRock created this plan that it pitched to the central bankers at the Jackson Hole meeting in 2019.
Instead of the Federal Reserve printing money for public sector entities, this new policy allowed Wall Street firms like BlackRock to be direct recipients of freshly printed dollars. By the time COVID hit, BlackRock's plan was already in motion. The result? Billions in profits for Wall Street and little to no relief for the average American. Her investigation revealed BlackRock's stranglehold on economic policy won't be broken easily, regardless of who holds political office. From 2008 to the COVID-19 pandemic, BlackRock has consistently positioned itself to benefit from each financial crisis at the expense of the public.
It's important to keep in mind that people like Larry Fink have very overtly said that markets don't like democracies. They like totalitarian governments. So this is a guy that is not about promoting your financial freedom or anyone's financial freedom. This is someone that likes top-down centralized control to reduce risk in markets in which he trades and is active, so he can, make more profit for his shareholders, which are, multi-billionaires and other people like that.
Webb points out how, rather than using its resources to support the American people, BlackRock has funneled money into its own ETFs, benefiting shareholders and elites. The firm's influence transcends political lines, affecting both Republican and Democratic administrations alike. Under Trump, BlackRock had free rein to drive fiscal policies that inflated the dollar and eroded the purchasing power of everyday Americans, a trend that continued under Biden. But what's even more alarming is BlackRock's next big move, the tokenization of real-world assets. This digital initiative, framed as sustainable development, is poised to commodify nature itself. Rainforests, national parks, and other finite resources could be tokenized and traded on the blockchain, creating an entirely new asset class for Wall Street.
Well, I think it depends on what happens with regulation and moving forward, ultimately. I think it's been made very clear by the people that like it in the traditional financial system now, that they only like it if it's, used as digital gold and not as something transactable. They don't want to transact with it. They want it to be something that's held and, again, is for asset storage, really. And that it's a digital asset, that it's never a digital currency.
But according to her, this so-called green initiative is nothing more than a smokescreen for a massive financial grab. As BlackRock leads the way in transforming natural resources into digital commodities, Webb highlights the collaboration of other powerful organizations, such as the Carlyle Group, with direct ties to the CIA. These financial titans operate behind the scenes, influencing policy decisions and ensuring their long-term dominance, regardless of political rhetoric. Webb warns that both political parties, despite their public disagreements, are beholden to the same elite interests. Trump's unfulfilled promise to reinstate Glass-Steagall, a policy that could have reigned in Wall Street, and his cozy relationship with Goldman Sachs executives are prime examples. Meanwhile, the Biden administration's continued deference to BlackRock and Wall Street signals more of the same. But really, at the core of her message here is a call to action. She urged Americans to stop focusing on superficial political rhetoric and instead scrutinize the track records of those in power.
People running for office, and, maybe people have better rhetoric or rhetoric you align with more, but rhetoric is rhetoric. We should pay attention to policy actions, and the policy records of the people running. I think it's very important. And again, not trying to say, like, don't vote or anything. Do whatever you want on election day. But the problem, as I see it, is that a lot of people on election day are like, as long as I vote, that's all I need to do. I can just
Mm.
go back to like
Yeah.
living my normal life and not do anything else to stop where the country is going. I'm just going to vote for this one person and that's it. And I think that's the
Yeah.
problem.
In the end, both sides are playing the same game, and the financial elite, whether backing Trump, Biden, or any future candidate, continue to shape a world that benefits only them. It really goes to show Bitcoin and its increasing role in corporate America, particularly if you look at River's recent data. Major corporations like MicroStrategy and Tether are leading a significant rise in corporate Bitcoin acquisitions, accounting for a staggering 85% of the total in 2024. Between September 2023 and August 2024, the number of publicly traded companies holding Bitcoin surged by 40%, highlighting a growing interest among businesses to use Bitcoin as a long-term investment and a hedge against inflation. Despite concerns over regulations and reporting obligations, companies are doubling down on their Bitcoin strategies. In fact, 70% of businesses that have bought Bitcoin haven't sold a single coin, seeing it as a solid addition to their financial operations. As this trend continues, corporations are expected to amass hundreds of Bitcoins daily by 2026, further intertwining corporate treasuries with the Bitcoin market. Imagine a company that owns most of the major pharmaceutical giants, controls a chunk of the mainstream media, and has its fingers in about 10% of every stock traded worldwide. Now picture this company quietly taking over governments, amassing a jaw-dropping $10 trillion in assets. Yeah, trillion with a T. That's BlackRock for you. To put it into perspective, BlackRock is worth half of America's entire GDP. It's gotten so jaw-droppingly heinous that both the US and Chinese governments have relied on BlackRock to help them dodge recessions. And as if that's not enough, BlackRock's founder and CEO, Larry Fink, now sits on some of the most powerful global organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations and the World Economic Forum. Remember what Henry Kissinger said? Whoever controls the money controls the world. Well, BlackRock is proving him right. BlackRock did all of this in just 36 years. And the craziest thing is you probably never even heard of them. There's a reason for that. But to get the full picture, we have to go back to Larry Fink's roots. Born in 1952 into a well-off Los Angeles family, Larry was always going after power. He started in politics, earning a BA in political science at UCLA, but soon figured out that politics wasn't where the real power was. So he entered banking and real estate, steeped in international money laundering affairs for the world's super rich. And of course, have I mentioned that he is a member of the most secretive fraternity out there, Kappa Beta Phi? There's a group whose members include Michael Bloomberg and other big shots at Goldman Sachs. With those connections in his pocket, Larry landed a job at First Boston, this somewhat dull New York-based investment bank. But what followed was anything but dull. Larry rapidly became the star of the mortgage bond department, making a pretty cool billion for the company. He was extremely close to becoming CEO. But then came the crash. Larry's ambition finally caught up with him when some reckless trades blew up in his face and he lost $100 million of the bank's money in just a few months. Ouch. That little stunt got him banished from Boston, leaving his dreams of world domination in tatters. But that's not where Larry's story ended. Fink wasn't ready to let go. He learned from this disaster and assured himself that he would, going forward, concentrate on risk management. And that is when it happened in 1988, BlackRock was born. Within 5 years, however, BlackRock ballooned from $5 million to an astonishing $8 billion. Of course, it wasn't smooth sailing all the way. He even got into a power tussle with his co-founder, Steven Schwartzman. In 1995, Fink ousted him and bought the stake of the company that Larry had in BlackRock for $250 million, a stake that would be worth more than $12 billion at current valuations. That was a real power move. Fast forward to the financial crisis of 2008, and most companies crumbled except BlackRock. Larry's extensive knowledge of mortgage-backed securities placed him in a perfect storm of profiteering from the calamity. Larry was on good terms with the Secretary of Treasury, so BlackRock received the lion's share of asset management contracts from failed banks. Overnight, Fink became the most powerful figure on Wall Street. BlackRock has played this power all out. It has grown into a planetary empire, and its CEO, Larry Fink, into a billionaire. A talk about oligarchs with unprecedented influence over the economy and, by extension, the world itself. Culture? Yes. Foreign policy? Pfft. Banks? Yep, those are in his pocket. World leaders? Being on speed dial is an understatement. Here's the crazy part. BlackRock now runs 10% of the economy. No longer just a foot in the door for control, but an ownership stake in practically every major industry, from media companies to banks, oil giants, and even weapon manufacturers. Its tendrils are that deep. And one of BlackRock's sneakiest power moves? Controlling the media, along with Vanguard, another investment powerhouse. They own chunks of the biggest media companies. We're talking 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, and 13% of Comcast, which itself owns NBC, CNBC, and Sky. Oh, and did I mention they have 12% of Disney too? Mickey Mouse might want to update his resume. So why does this matter? Well, anytime these companies want to make a big decision, they pretty much have to run it by BlackRock first. And it's not just media. BlackRock is the largest institutional investor in tech giants like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, you name it. They've got a slice of the pie. The list is endless, and their reach is dramatic. By extending its control this far, BlackRock now has a grip on over 90% of the media landscape, which might explain why you've probably never heard much about them. Because if you control the narrative, you control what the world knows. And if people started asking questions about BlackRock holding $9.5 trillion in assets, well, things might get uncomfortable for them. Controlling the media is a pretty handy step toward, taking over the world. Do you agree with Whitney? Let us know in the comments.